Nice to see you too.
Like Ladan, who would have thought when we were back in like, was that Group B, Group F?
Right. Right. Yeah. I
Jeff, were you in that group too?
I know I've been in a group.
With
I mean,
me?
after a while, this is the thing is, yeah, with you, I can't remember. They start to blur a little bit over time. But were we all in the same group?
I definitely was with Ty, but I feel like we worked because you really helped me with the poem that's in this book, actually. So it was like
When were you
irrelevant
guys
whether we were on the show.
When were you all at Cave Canem? I'm such an old head. I was
11, 12, 13.
I was 12, 14, but then I didn't do a third one.
What?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go take your third year.
Okay, if you don't want it.
I know. It's not that I didn't want it. It's just a lot was going on. I couldn't.
Yeah.
They were very nice about it.
Yeah.
All right, Bashan, you're good to go.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome everyone to another Politics and Prose Live. Before we do get started, just a few things to go over as usual. At any point during this event, you'll be able to go to the chat section and you'll be able to find links to purchase copies of different works from each of the authors we have with us today. We have quite a few, so plenty of opportunities to patronize. Additionally, at any point during the event, we would ask that if you would like to ask a question of any of the authors, you would place it in the separate Q&A box, which could just help us facilitate the question and answer and make sure that we see your question. Without any further ado, I'd like to thank all of the authors we have with us here today. And these authors are here because this is the first of 3 events where we are celebrating the Hurston Wright Legacy Award, and these are the nominees. With this particular program, this is representing the poetry category, and this event will be moderated by Teri Cross Davis. The Hurston Wright Legacy Award honors the best in Black literature in the United States and around the globe. Introduced in 2001, the Legacy Award was the first national award presented to Black writers by a national organization of Black writers. Fiction, nonfiction, and poetry honorees are selected in a juried competition. So let me ask you all to join us in congratulating these 2020 nominees. Here we have with us Mr. Geffrey Davis, we have Ms. Ty Freedom Ford, we have Ms. Ladan Osman, we have Ms. Alison Rollins, and we have Ms. Asiya Wadood. Teri, it's all yours.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Bashan. So welcome tonight to everyone who's watching us and who will be watching us, I'm sure. My name's Teri Cross Davis. I have the distinct honor and privilege of moderating tonight's conversation with these incredible poets, these incredible finalists for the Hurston Wright Legacy Award. First up, I will read the bios of our poets, and then it's my understanding that the poets will then read for 5 minutes apiece. Okay, poets, we're good? So I will read all your bios up front so that we have a solid, unbroken block of poetry. Isn't that a beautiful thing? So we'll go in the order that I will read your bio. So it's basically in alphabetical order. So Geffrey Davis, you will be the first up after I read the bios and finish. So our first reader for tonight, Geffrey Davis, is the author of Night Angler, winner of the James Laughlin Award, and Revising the Storm, winner of the A. Paulin Jr. Poetry Prize, and finalist for the Hurston Wright Legacy Award in Poetry. Davis teaches at the University of Arkansas and with the Rainier Writing Workshop Low Residency MFA program. Our second reader for tonight is Ty Freedom Ford. Ty Freedom Ford is a New York City high school English teacher, a 2019 Jerome Hill Artists Fellowship inaugural fellow. She is the author of 2 poetry collections, How to Get Over from Red Hen Press and More Black, love that title, from Augury Books, winner of the 2020 Lambda Literary Award for Lesbian Poetry. Ty lives and loves in Brooklyn, where she is an editor at No Dear magazine. Ladan Osman is the author of Exiles of Eden and The Kitchen Dweller's Testimony, winner of the Sillerman Prize. She has received fellowships from Cave Canem, the Lannan Foundation, and the Missioner Center. Her work in documentary film includes Sam Underground, Son of the Soil as a writer, and The Ascendants, a music docuseries forthcoming in October 2020. Osman lives in New York. Alison C. Rollins was born and raised in the city of St. Louis, is a 2019 National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellow. Her poems have appeared in American Poetry Review, the New York Times Magazine, the Poetry Review, and elsewhere. A Cave Canem and Callaloo Fellow, her current book is Library of Small Catastrophes. Asiya Wadood is the author of Crosslight for Young Bird, a finalist for the Hurston Wright Legacy Award in Poetry. A member of the Belladonna Collaborative, Asiya is a 2019-2020 Lower Manhattan Cultural Council Artist in Residence, and also currently a writer in residence at Dan Space Project. She lives in Brooklyn, New York, where she loves animals. Her current book is Syncope. So those are the bios of our poets for tonight, but let's get acquainted with their work. So Geffrey Davis, you're up to the mic.
It's good to be here with y'all. From the Suicide Notebooks. 1. Everyone has a poem called Mercy, Katie Ritchie. Mine begins inside a field overcome by wildflowers and with no one around, or with everyone around, but I am 5 years old. And it begins with my first yesterday blooming at the back of my mind, the moment memory bore this unfinished box for gathering experience, for keeping it not quite alive and singing at the horizon. Mine begins with worry, the sweet edge of awareness growing unbearably sharp. It begins by fearing what would follow all. 2. The song confronts death, Nick Cave. The city has been asleep when you tell me I was done once. I relight your cigarette inside the wind and you say it again. I was ready to walk out into the watery dark of the sound. And now I need an eternity to place my ear against the warm hole of your back. I need more moments to catch the muffled blood machine still knocking away. We can't hear the truth no mouth can get around. We try teaching ourselves its half names all the same. I try relighting your cigarette against your going, to keep you with me in the wind, to have you dry and right across from me. I want to learn the minor key that makes you stay, to hear you staying, to trust a voice could sing grief down, that a mouth could hold the right grace note against our suffering, to hold it as if some bird calling the whole-bodied sun and us as witness, to train the enormity of that bird on your windowsill another morning, to see you again. For the child's mole, like body mole, not animal mole. We won't tell you where it lies, as in time we might need the minor intimacy of that secret. Just creatures heavy with hope and begging against the grave song inside our living. We have agreed his death is the one cold chord we refuse to endure from the starry endlessness of the blues. And if ever we fail to bear the rate at which we feel the world pining for the body of our boy, we can conjure that mole, the small brown presence of it, tucked where only tenderness would think to look, and recall when it seemed nothing about our child could drift beyond the terrible certainty of love's reach. West Virginia Nocturne. One grief all evening. I stumbled upon another animal merely being itself and still cuffing me to grace. This time a bumblebee, black and staggered above some wet sidewalk litter. When I stop at what I think is dying to deny loneliness one more triumph, I see instead a thing drunk with discovery, the bee entangled with blossom after pale raindropped blossom gathered beneath a dogwood. And suddenly, I receive the cold curves and severe angles from this morning's difficult dreams about faith, certain as light arriving, certain as light dimming to another shadowed weight. How many strokes of undivided wonder will have me cross the next border, my hands emptied of questions? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. I'm so honored and humbled to be here with all of these beautiful writers whose work I love. Just 3 poems. Some said you were the spitting image of evil after Carrie Mae Weems. You became drum, became washboard, became hum, became tin can, became numb, became cowbell, became screen door, became dirt floor, became skillet, became clothesline, became dumb, became plow, became yardbird, became heifer and bitch, became wagon, became hitch, became Bible, became barbed wire, became strum, became head rag, became drum, became biscuit, became pitchfork, became hum, became slop jar, became shit, became North Star, became pit stop, became box spring, became mule, became numb, became shotgun, became sunflower, became battle axe, became dumb, became whisper, became drum. If someone should take your picture and make you black, for ingenue. Remember when R&B singers were all the rage, and all the rage was trademarked black, and Mary J. Blige wailed coked up love songs, and Oprah was king of every little black box inside white folks' minds, and white folks' minds wasn't nothing but a pancake box of stereotype, and Al B. Sure's light-skinned voice pimped the airwaves, and then came Wesley, black and smooth as all our scars we thought ugly, and Hallie quit David Justice, and no justice, no peace, but that nigga Rodney was already drunk off the settlement and celebrity, and yes, mediocrity is a motherfucker, although you'd never say it like that. Still, I understand how tiring it is, the way rage bubbles like a pot of grits, except ain't no Al Green or any other reverend to receive your holy metaphors. And you are better for it, and the world is better because you present like Christmas morning in Aretha's gospel, ain't nothing but black magic in a way that flour and water and fatback make gravy. And the way we die broke and indebted with nothing for our family to inherit but our gifts. Bloodborne and cosmic and illegitimate and inexplicable as any bastard, black as any mirror, staring back at us with our own eyes. Also known as Fly Nigga Factory, after Erykah Badu. Philosophy of finna. Fish dinner Tuesday, audacity of ain't. Praise this day we ain't bruised, ain't make the news, hallelujah holiday. About face them suede shoe blues, this the get down. Trajectory of come up, colored section inflection, epitome of hookup, imagination of skillet. fried whitings and white bread, greasy as your nappy head, even our heart attacks operatic. Where the peach tree be? Where your alcoholic uncle rocking ruffles and church shoes? Ain't he fly? Don't he contain multitudes like my grandmama pocketbook? Fuck we made of peppermint, Vaseline, masking tape, butterscotch, assembly line of crunk minus punk ass appropriation, funk soliloquy, cornbraid and cornbread, corn braids and cornbread, sardines and saltines, putting on the Ritz. Speaking of crackers, thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you to the Hurston Wright Foundation, to the judges, to my fellow nominees. It's such an honor to be here with you, and I'm so grateful. Thank you too to Politics and Prose for hosting, and to Teri Cross Davis for moderating. Thank all of you for being here. I'm actually going to read an older poem that I just understand to be more soothing, because that's what I need right now. And so maybe that's the most honest choice I can make. Verse of Hairs. First, a chapter on the hammock a mother's skirt makes for her daughters' heads at dusk on Sundays after each has come out of her bath, thinner skinned and raw in the palms, smelling like the chlorine in tap water, lotioned from head to toe because the rest of the week they'll only do their faces and elbows and whatever is showing. What is the smell around their ears? Wet cotton, clean asphalt drying in springtime sun. The sunlight is scented when white clover grows with grass. This is an old verse. The girls like caterpillars falling out of trees when it's barely warm. Even the inside of a quiet cement mixer would have been better than cool pavement. They come with hair dripping ornaments on their pajama backs. What about a verse for the dismay of one daughter cutting her own bangs into a bald spot? The hair put in her top drawer, 1,000 hairs in underwear, waistbands, gaps in the wood. A mother might cry trying to put a tail or braid where she can't. Or the surprise of fungus on a scalp, the ointments, the red comb set aside, the hot water and tide bath it must take after every use, the tuft of hair left by a dermatologist's razor for yet another sample, tufts of hair that fit no tail or braid. A mother can cry, trying. There must also be a line about finding curly hairs in pantyhose, the runs the girls made using tights as blonde hair, flesh-colored tights. Not their flesh, but sufficient for bombshells frolicking in carpet water, an old mattress made jet ski, fluorescent light, something like a music video shoot. We must have a verse about the grease under a mother's fingernails, how they become translucent after twisting two sets of prickly rollers, their inserts so similar to caterpillar hairs or a bottle's scrubbing brush. Also a passage for the little braids or buds in the baby girl's hair, the hair that barely makes tail or braid. A mother can cry. Thank you.
Sending immense gratitude to all those behind and in front of the scenes and screens to make this possible. I'm going to read 2 poems from the book. The first, 5 and a Possible. Spades is a way of life for Black folks. My mother went into labor in the middle of a game. I was born as 5 and a possible. She said she'd felt no greater pain than that loss, that when she turned away, shame-faced in the midst of kin, when certain bragging rights began to crown, they pulled my body from her diamond, held me up to meet her gaze, to study the odds of what a luckless God had given. An overbid could get you shot at grandma's house, could have you question the number of hearts you had in your hands. Everyone knew that my mother was the scorekeeper. She counted the books twice every round. There had been 3 before me. Babies my mother got but did not get. My mother taught me to watch a man's eyes when he deals, to cut the deck like his cord of wishful thinking. She'd warn in silence, don't talk across the table. Then demonstrate over dinner with my father as the air held the weight of things unsaid. After the divorce and grandma's funeral, all the words in my mother for tired were tired, her hands folded like cards. This poem I would like to dedicate to the fly that rested on the white snow of a certain person's head. Why is we Americans? We as gator teeth hanging from the rearview mirror, as sickle cells suckle at Big Mama's teats. We as dragonfly choppers hovering above Walden ponds. We as spinal cords shedding like the skin of a cottonmouth. We as Psalm 23 and the pastor's chattering chiclets. We is a good problem to have. We is throats constricting and the grape juice of Jesus. We is roach and mingus in birdland. We is body electric, eyes watering with moonshine, glossy lips sticky with lard. We is half brothers in headlock, arm wrestling in the dirt. We is Vaseline rubbed into knocked knees and cracked elbows. We is ham hocks making love to kidney beans. We is Orpheus, lyre in hand, asking, do we have a problem? We is the backstory of myth. We is sitting horse and crazy bull. We is brown paper bags, gurgled belches. We is hooded ghosts and holy shadows roaming Mississippi, goddamned. We is downbeats and syncopation's cousin. We is mouths washed out with the blood of the lamb. We is witch hazel coated backs sucking on peppermint wrappers. We is the spiked antennas of a triangle-faced praying mantis. We is barefoot tongue-tied hogs with slit throats and twitching bellies. We is sun tea and brood bitches. We is the crying pussies that stand down when told to man up. We is radio Raheem and Zoot Suit Malcolm. We is spit slick low cuts and fades. We is scrappy black masked coons and turkey-necked bullfrogs. We is the pits of arms at stake, the clouds frothing at the mouth. We is swimmers naked, private parts Whitman allegedly fondled beneath the water. We is late lurkers and castrated tree limbs on the Sunday before last. We as red-veined pupils and piss-stained knickers, slat-jawed and slumped in the bathroom doorway. We as whiplash and backhanded ways of settling grief. We as clubbing woolly mammoths upside the head, jamming fingers in Darwin's white beard. We as coming round yonder, pigeon-toed and bow-legged, laughing our heads off. We as lassoed cowboys swinging in the sweet summer breeze.
Wow. Okay. It's such an honor to be here with all of you and to have the pleasure of listening to all of you read before I have a chance to share some work. I just want to thank the Hurston Wright Foundation and Politics and Prose, and for everyone who's gathered here tonight. It's such a strange, such a strange time is putting it lightly, and just to be able to gather really means something right now. So I'm going to read something. I thought I would read from Syncope, but actually I'm going to read something else because just because of the mood. So I'm going to read just an excerpt because this is a longer piece, and I'll just read for the first 5 minutes of it. The order was in the hour of worship. The order was in the hour of worship. Stained glass windows act as mosaic. All radiant acts of attrition. All foregrounded prayers supplanted. All prayers a back channel. Every pew held our bodies. We turned our bodies to the covenant, buttressed by the Mason-Dixon and all its flat border counties. God vested his attention along its northern border, vested his attention where he wanted, rested his attention along the crest. The only act of God was in the hour of our worship, the cross-board directives, directives that could shower us as a trinity, shrouds of our own making. All exemplars prayers supplanted, all prayers supplementary work. The sun shone its piercing distance. It shone well because it wanted. The sun shone through the church pew. The sun shunted us along the back channel brood. The little tight crest began to peel at the seams. It began to gestate its seams as it peeled back. Anything that has crossed my paths, I would mother. Any semblance of family elocution, I'm mother. All felled logic familiar, huddled for warmth in the space between us. That's what distance does to us. This gilded foremost endeavor, clenched in chlorophyll, wrapping tendrils toward the sun, at every breath my countenance. My long path to wholeness, no country can grant me that. My lonesome 3/5, the precise mathematics of partition all across my selvage. Yesterday I sat with the ocean, seeking out its white noise, held a shell up to my ear, settled into its subterfuge. I took a sound recording of the waves, sound wave speculation, what's with the undercurrent, all these ocean grifters, what the flotsam water held in staunch relief. Yesterday I rose from my bed, Saturday morning, rode the ferry outbound, all New Amsterdam soundless current, a polyphonic noise system. No language was stayed. I broke with tradition. Hello, I called into a black vacuum. What I got was the virtuous salt sonic. What I got was a reply. Order comes to the house of worship. I slid my fingers through the hot sand. The sun burned my right leg, I let it. The planes, they flew overhead, I let them. The seagulls drifted outbound, let them. All birds alight when bruised, if their wings will carry them. Hello, I called into a vacuous island. From the bird's eye, we see the other islands. From the bird's eye, any light? From the bird's eye, pinprick. From the bird's eye, the sun was burning my leg, I let it. I counted 17 planes. I would triple that to count the gulls. I listened to the May ocean. I was still marooned in May. I was taking flight in May. I did my day as I wanted. I was still childless. I took my time to get to the ocean. I rode the ferry lengthwise. I loved how its motor trilled, strumming us through its cerulean back channels. All prayers supplanted. Every pew held our bodies. When we got to the waters, all the oak pews faced the Atlantic to carry us outbound silk coffers, to sit with the words held in the pews. The sun burned a hole right through me, I let it. It was a better mean to supplant the missives. The pews got filled with our bodies, our linen garments cuffed by him by selvage, salt-lined and miasma, little grains of sand embedded, how the water ebbs and the tides bind. A few came with their long rods named birches, all the branches peeled back. The order was in the hour of the workhorse. The others were in the house of worship. Any small act delivers the Lord's vested ships. Next, we managed the heap, the lumber. We dressed our hands in the lumber gloves. We used the Granberg sawmill and its guiding system. We felled the trees and trusted they become lumber. Wasted single splinter, all lumber cast from selvage. Diligently, the Bostrichidae emerged from their exit wounds, circular fissures in the wood's surface. We stowed inside them an ardent language, undo the pestilence, smoke out the dense lattice, the dead rising right to the surface, or better yet, let them live. We built the ship's deck around us. We remained in the pews. We closed our eyes as a protective message. We cupped our hands to our ears and amplify any noise, direct conduit to any ocean. Under this pestilence, the ship's birth is coming together. During the long construction, we never rose from the pews. We knew the order was in the hour of our worship. One by one, the timber became what it could become. When we opened our eyes, we were on the water. The Atlantic is a matriline. Wake, borehole, wave crest lumber, cadence, incandescence, all prayers a back channel. Mason-Dixon bifurcated, split along Garrett County. We touched the boat to bless it, touched all its minor parts, touched anything unruly. Beyond 3/5 is the rest of Plessy. The order was in the hour of the workhorse, doused our hands in the mineral oil, we blessed it, this our finished vessel, so it would shunt us far from here. No map governed our journey, a nautical chart, a rote index of possible nexts, barren, void, electric language. No map yet governs us, thus no map governs our journey. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. Thank you all. Just to go back, the line you had, Asia, anything that would cross my path, I would mother. Salt Sonic. I heard that. Shout out to Lucille Clifton, no boat to bless it. I'm here for that. And Alison, 5 and a possible. Yes, I think back to Terrence Hayes. There should be a documentary about spades. And just that line pulled my body from her diamond. And also, I too heard the Clifton reference there from, was it the Lost Baby poem? Yes, I think it did. And just to keep going, Ladan, the grease under a mother's fingernails. Thank you for making that holy. As a mother who has done many heads of hair, thank you for making that holy, for raising it up because it needs to be raised up. And Ty, rhyming finna with dinner. Really? We're going to do that. We're going to do that. I love it. Love it. Love it. And just the anaphora that you used and became that, oh, strum, drum, hum. Oh, so much was just alive for me sonically there. And Geffrey, just suicide books, the longing, the grief in your work just sang to me. And West Virginia Nocturne, oh, there was a line, undivided wonder, just the natural world, the fear, the parenting, the sun, all of it, it really sang to me. So I want to thank you all for this moment where I could have heard more. You could have read longer in my mind, because anytime you're reading, I'm in another world with you and your words are creating that world. So thank you so much for your artistry in this evening and for the opportunity to be transported by your work right now. So we're going to start off with some questions. And right now, I will pose this question to all of you. And I know this is also the time when our participants were there. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A and I can retrieve them and ask them of our brilliant poets for this evening. But first off, I'd like to ask you, as we're in this time, you can call it a dumpster fire, you can call it, you can blame the pandemic, you can blame so many things, or you can call out so many things, the tumultuous, the culture's changing, the sea change, all of it. Whatever you want to call this moment, tell me, what role does poetry play for you right now? So just poets, please unmute yourselves and just jump in. Let me know.
It's good to be with y'all. Thank you so much, Teri, for that generous sort of weaving. I think so. When I'm working with other writers, so I happen to be in the classroom, and one of the things that I'm trying to frame my interactions with other writers according to is like the ways that I need poetry. Like I need poetry because it reminds me of things that I would otherwise forget. And one of those things is the ways in which, you know, we have all these narratives that tell us the sort of pace at which, you know, either we're behind or we're ahead or we're over here when we ought to be over here. And for me, like a poem reminds me, like, fuck all that. Like you are where you are, listen to that, and then maybe ask some questions about what comes next or what came before. And so I think it diminishes the margin that I'm expected to sort of think about what, where I need to be. That's not where I am. And so, you know, I think poems continue to sort of give me an opportunity to check back in when I lose traction on my sense of where I am or where I want to be or where I don't want to be. So for me, it's like a pacing thing right now, because there's so many, I mean, even timelines, you know, it's one of the hard things of scrolling along a timeline is just so many other paces that convince you that you're not going fast enough or slow enough or this way enough or that way enough. And so that's usually where I start, is sort of blessing a kind of pacing that I have actually access to.
I think that's great, Geffrey. And I love that you're saying like it's kind of centers you in the moment, right?
Yeah.
So what about for the other poets? What do you need from poetry right now? And let me just add in too, and everyone can jump in too. What's the role of poets right now? So what do you need from poetry? What is it giving you right now?
I think the thing that it always gives me is a reminder that ambiguity is not dishonesty, that there is an honesty in accepting that there's reality and unreality and a lot of things in between. And it's a kind of violence to just know something or just know someone or how to name something. And that's a very like colonial activity and something that's even before that, whatever it is that made people start to think that it was a good idea to start colonizing, whatever that force is, I think is you know, like Geffrey's talking about, slowed down, but also dissipated by ambiguity and submission to that as well. And how poetry also gives me precision in language and in imagery, which I think there's a lot of imprecision and a lot of laxness that some people are really allowed to take liberties with, which destroys so many of our freedoms, actually. Their crudeness, really, you know, that attends all besides, you know, the violence and destruction and commotion and just like general melee there. And so, yeah, I think that's one thing that poetry, but like poetry, not in the sense of just poems, but poetry in music, in movement, in the act of recitation, in breath, anything that feeds, you know, the making of poems.
Yeah, that's thank you so much. I love that ambiguity is not dishonesty, a way to recognize kind of the complexity and the multitude within the moment and within each kind of individual, and to give it space and breath. So thank you so much for that, lady. What about Alison and Ty and Asia?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all of that. And I think for me, there's something about remembering this kind of continuum that always exists between, I mean, it has to do, I guess, with ambiguity as well, but just a continuum of possibilities that can exist and can kind of rest beside each other. And just, I mean, I think poetry always, there's the expectation of that always existing. I teach young children starting at kindergarten. I teach poetry to kids. And so I feel like a lot of times the kids remind me, I mean, this is always like front of mind with children, because they inherently accept that there is this kind of continuum of ambiguity. Like that's a given. When we're looking at work together, they understand, like they have this really special ability to be able to like stretch out and like pull apart the understanding of any poem and look at it from so many different possible ways. And it's so instructive, because that ability, like that kind of narrative is missing. It's so missing right now, where we are, you know, politically, the state of affairs with things. And so I think, yeah, just this continuum of possibility, I think that is something that I'm always reminded of, especially during the school year when I'm working with young children.
That continuum of possibility, that's lovely. And it's a lovely thing to teach to young children. Having taught my, having read to my children in the womb, I read them poetry in the womb and read them poetry when I nursed them. And just to see how those bright young minds attack the language and just have so much fun with it. And how sometimes even what someone might consider a misinterpretation is actually the right way to interpret a thing. With such joy and wonder, right? It's a lovely thing. So there we go. All right. So what about Alison and Ty? What role does poetry play for you now? What do you need from poetry, and what role do you think poets should be playing right now?
I was going to piggyback on what you said about, like, speaking of attacking the language, right? And it's kind of also piggybacking on what Ladan was saying about how there is this like assault on our language right now with the way folks are speaking. And I feel like poetry just reminds me how much of a prize language is, and how like it allows me to sort of enter the world on a very like microscopic level, in the way that poets do, you know, sort of attacking like language on a word level, on a syllable level, on a line level. And so, and just sort of examining like what's beautiful and what's ugly, but within that sort of confine of the poem. And so for me, it's just about like, for me, I've been using it as just as an escape, as a way to just get the fuck away from all of this nonsense that's going on, and really like, you know, like jibber jabber or whatever those terms are that we use to describe people who talk nonsense, gibberish, you know, like just because it's like, and to really like sort of rejoice in like what we do as poets and as technicians who are crafting like image and worlds with language. So yeah, for me, it's just about, it's more of a like, it's a reprieve, or like just a way to escape, you know, all of this, you know, shit that I can't handle, right? And just to sort of like tuck in to a book and just to like put the world on pause. So for me, I've been using it more as like a salve. So yeah.
Yeah, I get that, definitely. I feel like when you attend when you're in these virtual poetry readings, the rest of the world doesn't exist for that moment. Right. And that's one of the things, like, I just hearing you all read your work, it was so nice to live in that moment of the language and to let it breathe. So yeah, definitely hear that. Alison, what are your thoughts? What role does poetry play for you right now? What do you think the role of a poet is in this moment?
I've been returning a lot to Audre Lorde's collection of speeches and essays, Sister Outsider. And I think poetry is not a luxury, and also the transformation of silence into language and action really sit at the center of how I'm thinking about approaching poetics in this particular moment. I'm thinking a lot about survival, what it means to survive, and how survival is attached to an utterance or a sound or I think a lot about the debate last night in terms of saying, I'm speaking, an utterance of I am emitting a sound that requires or should necessitate a listening ear. And I think the poetic page is a space that allows for listening and allows for a portal of being heard, which for many people, especially that exist and live on the margins of society, is often not in any way accessible. And so whether those poems become formally published in the written page or in a formal setting of a book, I think there's something really sacred about sound and the attachment of language and sonic rhythm to an utterance, to a speech act that suggests and records and illustrates what it means to survive, what it means to be alive.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. And the page allows for listening, and you need a listening ear. I think that's brilliant, and it really speaks to how to be an active listener and an active reader, right, of poetry. You need to be both, and you need to read those poems out loud. I often tell people, you have to read the poem out loud. What are you doing? Like, it has to be read. We have to hear the sounds. We have to hear the music. You mentioned that you've been returning to Audre Lorde, and it's, well, it's kind of funny as I'm sitting here next to some Audre Lorde books that I'm reading for, to teach later, or rereading. So let me ask all of you all, are there poets you find yourself revisiting in these times of stress and times of sadness or times of anger? And I ask that because I think that there may be some, people who are watching who want to know where they can turn and who can create that work that will be that salve for them. So who do you all suggest returning to in times of sadness, anger, fear, stress? Who are your go-tos?
Well, you already said Lord. I mean, obviously, and then the other mother, Lucille Clifton. Like, I mean, that collected works of Lucille Clifton is like my Bible, son. So it's like, there we go. That's all I need. Lord Clifton, I'm good. So, yeah.
Some of the other poets. So we got Laura Clifton. Who else do you return to, Geffrey?
I was just gonna say, amen. No, but I mean, for real though. But in particular, I think, of course, there are people who have for whom we have a more broad or overlapping collective experience of their impact on our psyche, on our voice, on our listening. But I returning to the poets who have helped you break a spell that you didn't realize you were living inside of. And like Clifton is one of those poets for me, where I go back to remind myself that once upon a time I had spells I needed broken. I needed to exercise them from how I was feeling myself in the world, the things I thought I could and couldn't do, the kind of hearing that I wasn't doing for myself. And sometimes I return to those poets to remind myself that there are spells that I still need breaking, and that I need to hear that happening in other folks' works. But yeah, that's all.
Yeah, so spells to be broken. I think that's a great way to put it. Almost like a stupor sometimes that you run into and by rote, and you begin not to see other things and not to hear other things. So it's nice when someone can take the wax out of your ears and say, okay, listen, there's a world. So yeah, that's great. Others who were, so we got Lorde, we got Clifton. So anybody watching, if you're thinking, what do I need? Who do I read? Other than reading the brilliant poets who are listed here, there's always Audre Lorde and there's always Lucille Clifton. So you have that right now, but who else would you all suggest there?
Go ahead.
Okay. I know we already said Lorde 1,000 times, but I will just say one more thing about it. Every few months, I like to listen to a recording of Audre Lorde reading Uses of the Erotic. Every few months, just listen to it in her own voice, and just remind myself about like I guess how to live, like in the most basic terms, how to live and how I want to live, and what forces I want to give power to shape my own life. But in addition to that, I would say I always return to Don Lundy Martin's Good Stock, Strange Blood, always. And then this is a collection, Think of Lampedusa. It's by José Gabeau. And it's not, I wouldn't necessarily call it a balm or a salve, but it's a really necessary book. And it's, I think of it as sort of a companion to my book Syncope that I wrote this past year. And so I often just return to him, and return to him like for lots of different reasons, but also just for like his writing is so crystalline. There's something so exact and devastating about it. But I need it. It feels necessary also. So not a balm, but still find a way to return to it anyway.
All right, nice. Thank you so much for those recommendations. And Dawn Lundy Martin, yes. So to move on though, one of the other things I know that I'm just curious about is this is such a difficult time, right? Many people, this is now what, the 6th month of working from home for a lot of people, myself included. This is now, you know, kids are in virtual school, some in actual school, not being able to visit loved ones, parents, not being able to hug loved ones. So in this time when we are so separated and so isolated, or we can be, and physically and like emotionally and mentally, do you see that influencing your work now? Do you see everything that's going on influencing your work? Are you all the type of writers where it has to take some time, you have to absorb it before you can kind of spit it back out? Are you writing to the moment, as people might ask? Or do you feel as if, you know, that poets can exist outside of having to respond initially to what's going on right now? So do you see this pandemic? Do you see the cultural revolution in so many ways that I want to believe that we're in? Do you see any of this influencing your work?
I've been thinking a lot recently about the phrase shelter in place, like what it means to have a Black femme queer body in the world, and what it means to view the actual body as a vessel, as a country, as a homestead, as a container that is has a certain aesthetic that is perceived externally in ways I have no control over, and can often be in contrast to ways I perceive myself internally. I think a lot about the text, like The Body Is Not an Apology, which I think is a great other book for recommended reading. What it means to be forced to go inward in a type of way that I think is often uncomfortable and unsettling, and to try to commit to the notion of my body is where I have a shelter that is in the world. If it's confined further by being inside of my home, that means something. But what does it mean to really develop a more intimate, close relationship with the actual shelter I entered this world with? And to not to romanticize that, but to really come to terms with that in a way that the environment that the natural world has forced me to, I think is a way to maybe reframe or recontextualize the experience of quote unquote sheltering in place, or quote unquote being quarantined, what it means to live a life that's confined to this particular container, really thinking philosophically, but also just practically about what that means has been an interesting experience during this period.
I'm thinking, so I thank you, because I think that's exactly, in many ways, kind of what I was looking for, the idea of taking the term shelter in place and really thinking about it. And then I have to wonder, what do you do when that shelter has a target on it? How do you live then? Then what is really a shelter? So thank you for that moment. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to think deeply about that. We do have a question. And so David writes, I love the distinctness, the distinctiveness, there we go, of your work and writing. Tell me what's important in the community embrace of you, as in, you know, supporting as writers. Like, so what's important for you as writers to be supported and to support your creations right now? What do you all need as writers to be supported?
I need a country house in upstate New York, so.
Can you take me with you?
Any takers? I'm just saying.
And I need a room in that house. It don't have to be that big. Just a spot in that.
Listen, absolutely. Yes. In other words, I need to get out of the city. Like for me, I think that's what, you know, like Alison's talking about, like, you know, your body as sort of a shelter, and in the city, the city is sort of, you know, its own container, especially in New York. And three of us here are in New York. And so we know how that is, especially the early parts of the pandemic. The sirens were just unending, unnerving, and like, and I found myself like, I mean, like I was, you know, I was like this, like literally shaking most of the time. And then having to teach, and you know, there's teachers here as well. Like, I mean, through that. And so for me, I've been thinking a lot about just literal shelters, like, and how do I get out of this one, and how do I go to one that feels safer and less populated, and only populated with nature and trees and shit that's going to calm me. Yeah, because I don't even remember the question, but what I need. Yes, I need nature. I need that country house. Yeah, because I just need to get out of this city. It's a rough environment to be in a lot of times. Although it's very inspiring to me. I feel like a lot of my work draws from city folk, but at the same time, it's like I have to get out of it in order to write about it. And so, yeah, Teri, maybe like it's going to take some time for me to actually write about this moment. I think we're all still like in shock, right?
Yeah. All right, thank you, Ty. We are like down to like 3 minutes here, so I suppose we should say all the thanks. But I just want to thank you all again, and I want to thank Hurston Wright and Politics and Prose. Let's thank our incredible writers, Geffrey Davis, Ty Freedom Ford, Ladan Osman, Alison Rollins, and Asiya Wadu. Thank you all for your work and for your presence tonight, and for your work in general. And you know, you mentioned it earlier, Ty, and I'd already written this when you said it, but I was like, poetry is our balm. And I feel restored, and I do, because for this hour, I got to hear you all, and I got to be here with you. I was thinking about what you said, Geffrey, about, you know, kind of letting poetry kind of grind you into that moment and being open to that moment. So I'm happy for that ability to be here. And I hope that others feel as restored as I do. And so I guess I'll turn it back over to Politics and Prose.
All right.
So thank you all
Thank
again.
you.
And congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Bless you, all y'all.
Yes, thank you all very much for a very wonderful event. I didn't mention this before, but I will mention it now, that any donations that were made and can still be made tonight will go to the Hurston Wright Foundation. So that's very important. Wanted to make sure that was out there. Once again, this is part of a 3-part series. This is the first one. The second one is coming up this Saturday, October 10th at 1 p.m. So look forward to seeing a lot of you there, hopefully. Well, in a way, seeing, so to speak. We've heard you all recommend books, so we can kind of skip over that part, I suppose. Again, the links are still available to purchase the works of each of these award-winning artists, hopefully, coming up soon. And once again, we want to thank everyone for joining us, and want to tell everyone to have a good day.